Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It is brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is here as we take a look at the Eagles, Buccaneers. A lot of injury stuff to go over and the potential of the Eagles missing some really key guys on Sunday down in Tampa, a place that they have not fared very well in recent times. We'll get into that and more right now with Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can get on all podcasting platforms and their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. Geoff Mosher is with us now on the Sports Bash. What's up, Mosh?
How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing A-OK, man. You got the Eagles 2-1, and we were just talking about it before you came on. The league. I can't find the 5 best teams in this league. I can't come up with 5.
The 5 best teams in this league. Well, certainly the 3-0 teams, right, are not ones that you thought would be among the top 5, like the Steelers and the Vikings, and there's another 3-0 team that's probably Seattle, right? Yeah, who saw that coming, right? And then you've got the 49ers, the Lions that a lot of people like, and they're reeling a little bit. Obviously, the Chiefs, they're smooth sailing. It's the Chiefs and everybody else, Mike. That's how it's been.
Do we even think the Chiefs are that far and away above everyone other than the fact that they have Patrick Mahomes? Because the way they're winning games, we're watching them and saying, are they overly impressive?
No, yeah, that's a great point. I mean, their passing game is still not as prolific as you thought it would be. Travis Kelce is starting to disappear in the offense. They had a couple of left tackle issues. So you're right. But that's, they're the Chiefs, and they figure out a way, and they get a very beneficial call against the Falcons and wind up winning the game. But yeah, I kind of like the fact that right now the whole NFL is sort of in you're in a wait and see, and some of the traditional powers like the Ravens, right, are not, and the Niners are looking a little shaky at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the Niners are injury-related. They've got so many problems there. The Ravens is a little bit of a surprising one. But
how about the Bengals, too? I think a lot of people thought this would be the Bengals back this year, with
Bengals, I definitely put them in that category of disappointing. There's so many teams that you're just like, I can't figure them out. But what have we figured out in your mind about Philadelphia? Is this a hard team to try to figure out with all these injuries?
Yeah, they were a tough team to figure out before the injuries. The injuries just made it even tougher for them. Adam and I were not joking, but we were talking about this upcoming matchup against the Bucs, who have a lot of injuries right now on defense. Vita Vea hurt, Antoine Winfield hurt, somebody else who I'm not thinking of hurt on their defense. And yet the Eagles, all their injuries are on offense. So it's not like you can kind of attack their injury-related weaknesses, because the Eagles right now don't know who's going to be available to them offensively to be able to attack those weaknesses.
Yeah, let's look at some of the injuries and kind of get your thoughts, Moshe, on how important they are and how much they can overcome them. Obviously, Lane Johnson, and he did not practice today. You've also got Mekhi Becton, who was back at practice today. Mailata sat out practice today. We don't know what his the injury report should be coming out any minute here. But those guys, Lane Johnson, we would think most likely not going to play this week.
You never rule anything out, but Lane has a history with concussions. He was throwing up. It is tougher now than ever before for players to get in because of the protocol changes to get back into a game. It was rare to begin with that a player who suffered a concussion in a Sunday game was going to be able to make it back for the following Sunday's game. It had happened a couple of times, but it was rare by percentages, but now it's even tougher. So I have a hard time, never rule anything out, but I have a hard time thinking that Lane's going to be available in that game.
Yeah, and that would be what Fred Johnson, I guess, would be the replacement. I guess what happens if Mailata and Lane Johnson were out?
So if Mailata and Lane Johnson are out, so you mean in the middle of a game? Because if both are out, they do have Darian Kennard, who hasn't been active. But if both those guys got hurt in practice, they would activate Kennard, and Fred would probably play left tackle, and Kennard would probably play right tackle.
They wouldn't use Becton or Steen even at one of those tackle spots?
Steen maybe. in an emergency, I don't know about Becton because if he's healthy, you want him at right guard where he's been playing it. They don't like to move a guy who's healthy to another spot and then change two different positions if they can avoid it.
Geoff, the potential of them having to play a game without AJ and Devontae, that is becoming more realistic. So, in your mind, what does an offense without those two guys look like?
Well, it's an offense that's going to have to lean, once again, heavily on Dallas Goedert. But now you don't have Devontae Smiths that sort of also make the defense wonder where you're going. So it's an offense that, A, would have to lean heavily on Dallas Goedert. B, because of this depth issues in general at receiver, you're probably going to have to play a lot more 12 personnel. So not.
Looks like we lost Moshe for a second here. We'll get him back here on the Sports Bass Live 97.3 ESPN. Yes, we did lose you for a second there, and you're kind of – looks like you're back. All right. So 12 personnel is where we kind of lost you.
And then running the ball more, I was getting into. I mean, you're going to have to – you probably should have ran the ball a little bit more against the Saints, to be honest with you.
You worry about Barkley's workload at all?
Of course. But at this point, you really don't have much of a choice. I'd like to say that this would be the game where you can get Jahan Dotson more involved, but you just haven't seen enough evidence yet of Jahan Dotson being a guy who's going to do something in this offense. So to me, it's 12 personnel, it's 13 personnel, is running the ball more and trying to get the ball to Goddard the best you can.
Yeah, because those guys, Smith and Brown, I mean, I would imagine Brown is not going to play because you have the bye next week. Don't take the chance. Let him sit out.
I don't know about that.
Right, but with Smith being out. Yeah, because with Smith being out, I would imagine, because Smith was not at practice today, I would imagine it's going to be tough for Smith to play.
Yeah, I think it'll be really tough to play. And I don't, we'll have to see. Was A.J. Brown was not at practice today, correct? Or was he limited? I don't think the injury report is out yet.
They did not make a designation on his status, but I don't think he was there.
Well, and that's interesting because they didn't even practice today. They had a walkthrough. So that's really just an estimation of if you were supposed to practice. So obviously, if he was not at the walkthrough and he wouldn't have projected to be the practice, it's going to be a rough go to get him back for the game.
Oh, no doubt about it. And listen, as you mentioned, Dotson, you brought him in here to be the third guy, kind of a slot guy, and we talked about it all training camp. If you lost Brown and Smith, by the way, they were not there and warming up before the walkthroughs. Brown, Smith, Lane Johnson, they were all out today. They did not practice at all. So, that would be the one spot that if you lost those two guys for a game or extended, you were in some big trouble. They just don't have outside guys to really replace the current players that they have, and having them both hurt at the same time makes it even that more difficult. So, as you said, maybe you lean on Saquon Barkley more. Dotson would be, a guy that you're hoping for. But is this a game plan that they can draw up? Is this a good matchup to get Goddard involved?
Yes and no. I mean, it's a good game plan because Todd Bowles typically likes to blitz a lot.
Yep.
So you will have some one-on-ones, but even it's not like Todd Bowles just blitzes, right? He has very smart blitzes. He has droppers. He has disguised blitzes. So it's not hard to put a guy or two in Dallas Goedert's direction and still send a 5 or a 6-man rush. That's why I say it can't just be all Dallas Goedert all the time. If that were the case, then I'm trying to give any team that just has a good tight end and no weapons would be better. But it's hard. It's hard to do that when you've got a really good pass catching tight end and no real other threats in your receiving core.
Yeah. They've had some problems with the blitz against Todd Bowles teams. When you look at this offense with the lack of weapons, is this one of those weeks where it's even a worse matchup with Bowles in the blitz?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, honestly, Jalen Hurts is really good against the blitz. Now, granted, he's good because he also has some really good weapons. But obviously, when teams blitz in many situations, you have one-on-one matchups. And if you just have some decent receivers who can win one-on-ones, you can move the ball. So, but Todd's really good at also blitzing with zone coverage. So that makes it a little bit tougher. And yes, you're right. The Eagles, like many quarterbacks and many offenses, have struggled against his defenses. He's one of the best in the league. I was joking with Kaplan because they just played the Broncos right last week and they lost, but I don't know if there are two coaches who blitz more than Todd Bowles and the Broncos defensive coordinator Vance Joseph. I'm wondering if there were any 4-man rushes in that game. It must have been just a complete blitz fest.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not. So yes, it can be easier if you get those one-on-ones, but you need the one-on-ones to win.
You sure do. And listen, it's going to be very interesting to see what their pass game looks like without those two guys if they do not play this week. Conversely, you got Evans and Godwin, those two guys, very good. Baker Mayfield. But last week, I mean, they were terrible at home against Denver. So it's so hard to get a read on some of these teams. But the Eagles' secondary matchup is probably going to be the big highlight up against those receivers this week. Can they get rush with the 4-man against this offensive line?
Well, they're going to probably need more than just one guy getting to the quarterback. I mean, they were able to survive last week on just Jalen Carter really getting to the quarterback. I'm sure the Bucs have watched the tape, and they saw that Vic Fangio figured out some interesting ways to make sure that Jalen Carter was single blocked on a lot of runs and passes, and I'm sure that the Bucs will counter and figure out a way to. Especially, maybe they'll let it go for a couple of series first and see how he's playing, and then go to that.
Well, okay, so these two teams played in January, and Philadelphia went down there and got lambasted, basically. Game was never really competitive. What is different about these two teams that would say, look, Philadelphia's a favorite on the road in this game? Are you surprised by that?
I am. I'm really surprised, especially given the injuries that the Eagles have.
And I don't know if that's changed. It opened up at, I think Philadelphia was favored by 2.5 when it opened.
Yeah, that's what I just looked at it today, and I think that's what it said. So, yeah, I'm a little surprised. It might change. It might change significantly throughout the week as more injury information comes out.
It's 2 now. Yeah, it's 2.
2? Yeah, see, it's already starting to drop a little bit.
2
yeah,
and the over-under is 44, so it still feels like they think the Eagles' offense is, like normal here.
Yeah, I guess. 44 is one of those weird numbers, like 22 or 23 to 21. Is that a high-scoring game anymore? Who knows? But it does seem like the way the Eagles have played games that's kind of a high total, and also the way Tampa has played games. Now Tampa has their weapons healthy. If you remember last year, Mike Evans dropped like 5 passes in that game. That game was closer than the score looked. It was 25-11. But the Eagles' offense did not necessarily perform really well. Jalen threw 2 picks. DeAndre Swift ran the ball really well, but they got a safety. They only scored 23 total points, and again, the Bucs dropped a lot of passes in that game. It was a very odd game.
That game opened, by the way, at 47. It's now dropped down to 44. So I guess you are starting to see the remnants, if you will, of no Smith and possibly no A.J. Brown. We'll see what Smith's availability. I don't have a lot of hope for him. Brown, maybe with the hamstring, maybe as a decoy or tries to give it a go. We'll see. Could see Dotson. Who's the next guy? Campbell?
Paris Campbell. He would be the next guy.
Johnny Wilson. John Ross got elevated to the practice squad too, right?
Well, he got signed to the practice squad, yes. Brought back to it. But, I don't think that you'll be seeing John Ross in this weekend's game or elevated for this game.
Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. Check out the Inside the Birds podcast on all podcasting platforms. And check out their YouTube channel. Subscribe to that for more Inside the Birds content. They're getting you ready for the Eagles and the Buccaneers, as we are this week on Football at 4. Thanks, Moshe.
All right. Have a great one, Mike.